We get into chemtrails a little bit because chemtrails obviously block our sun. Clouds, snow in the winter time, and there's an obvious correlation, an obvious link between the lack of sun in the wintertime and the amount of sicknesses that people tend to get during the winter. Pollution, sunblock, which also blocks out all the beneficial rays but lets in the aggressive rays of the sun. Certain kinds of medication can block the great effects of the sun, especially anti-epileptic drugs. And it makes it so that the vitamin D doesn't metabolize properly within the body. And people also who are undergoing chemotherapy can't take in D3, as well as those with cancer who aren't undergoing chemotherapy, one of the most poisonous, destructive things that, quote unquote, treatments that we have. And just as a side, if you know anybody who is dealing with cancer, or is thinking about chemotherapy, please advise them against it, because only 2 to 3 people survive after chemotherapy. And again, I am going to point out one more time, D3, cannabis, raw food. Seriously, the amount of problems that this heals is just incredible. But yeah, obviously what blocks our sun? Chemtrails, because chemtrails do the same thing that sunblock does. It blocks out the beneficial rays of the sun, and it lets in all of the aggressive rays. We cannot overdose on D3. This is very important, because like I said above, the amount that could kill a 165-pound man is 7 million to 10 million units. That's 7 million to 10 million vitamins if you're taking the kind of vitamin D3 that I take, the 1,000 units per vitamin. So it's nearly impossible. You'd have to eat, as Bill Ryan says, you would have to eat a polar bear, in order, like an amount, akin to the size of a polar bear, in order for that to actually have some sort of huge effect. Now, I'm going to get more into the vitamin D thing, but there was something happening when we had the quote-unquote swine flu. And just as an aside, I don't know, that will probably never be a topic, just because it's really something that you can mention as an aside more than anything, because it's over, it's done with, and it was all bull to begin with, especially considering, I think it was something like 200 people were dying from the swine flu, but the normal flu that people tend to have during the winter months and everything kills like 30,000 to 50,000 people a year or something like that. So it was just a big hubbub just to terrify people. But what ended up happening in the Ukraine, well, I'll read you this report. And this is old. Yet again, this was from November 2009, but it's really prevalent because it does talk about vitamin D. We have not communicated directly with our source, who relayed this report via an intermediary who spoke to her in depth on the phone 2 days ago. The source is a doctor and qualified nutritionist in Kiev with recent hands-on experience of treating patients who are seriously ill with what the Russians are calling mutant black lung. Apparently an apt name for a horrific and often fatal set of symptoms. The problem, corroborated by Dr. Henry L. Neiman and others, is that the H1N1 virus, swine flu, has mutated, and the new strain goes straight to the bottom of the lungs, where it causes massive bleeding triggered by a cytokine storm. It's the patient's own immune overreaction that kills them. This is what happened in the second wave in the fall of 1918, and that would be the Spanish flu, I believe. It's not pneumonia, and it's not pneumonic plague, which is a bacterium, not a virus, but more on that below in the final paragraph of this report. However, it's extremely nasty and can be a very fast killer of anyone affected. One source said that she had kept someone seriously ill patient alive with intramuscular injections of vitamin D up to 30,000 units twice a day. This was a surgeon who had suddenly collapsed in the operating theater 40 minutes after waking up one morning. The surgeon's colleague was not so lucky. He collapsed 2 hours later and was dead the next day. She personally witnessed aircraft spraying something that was slimy and smelly over Lviv. These were not chemtrails. It was more like crop dusting. The altitude was about 1,500 feet, 500 meters. They were large aircraft. The windows in her 4-story building shook when one of the planes passed. This was 3 days before the outbreak there. That report is matched by information she learned in Kiev, where the same planes were reported, and again the outbreak occurred 3 days later. There are restrictions on travel. The source's husband had to bribe his way to cross one national border. In many villages, one cannot leave. In larger towns, however, it's easier to find a way out. Taxi drivers are not permitted to leave a city without a military license. The source reported on one occasion seeing several pickup trucks traveling together between cities, which had on them a sign to the effect that one should keep clear as there were bodies on board. About 10% of patients are recovering quickly and discharging after a few days. The rest are still in hospital, and if not dead, are not recovering after even 3 weeks. She noted that they might still die, so it's impossible to establish the true case fatality rate. In the Kiev hospital where she works, 40% of the staff are ill, and the 600-bed hospital, usually 2/3 full, now has 1,200 patients, and they have even had to move bodies out of the morgue to make room for beds. Many who did not fall ill are not reporting to work. The healthcare system is breaking down. There is nothing in the pharmacies except for aspirin, if one is lucky. Locals are falling back on traditional remedies, and some groups, for instance, were going into the forest to hunt for medicinal mushrooms because they had nothing else to use. That's fabulous. No one in Ukraine has accurate statistics, but the World Health Organization are everywhere. Her colleagues are baffled because they look to the Western media for reports and they see nothing. They cannot understand this, but this is now being well reported in Russia. The disease is now reported in Poland, Turkey, Russia, and the Czech Republic. The source had encountered cases of bubonic and pneumonic plague professionally and was familiar with the symptoms. In this new epidemic, the symptoms of severe lung damage were so similar to pneumonic plague that she said it was as if someone had taken the bacterial component of the plague and shoved it into a virus. Please note that we are not medically qualified and cannot comment on this remark. We do understand that bacteria and viruses are very different, affect the body differently, and need to be treated differently. Also, please note the comments of the Ukrainian coroner here, a must-read report, which is very likely to be accurate. We await further information. But what's amazing about this is that this woman, and this isn't, I looked for this specifically to read to you because on the Project Camelot forum back in November of 2009 when this was all happening, there were a few different threads that were talking about this and how this woman was actually giving, and now the numbers were different, this woman was actually giving over 100 patients each 10,000 units of vitamin D3, and it was healing these people, of course, because vitamin D3 is wicked freaking incredible. So but in this, it says at least one person was given 30,000 units twice a day. And it's just more information about how awesome D3 actually is, about how awesome our sun actually is, and about how the information we've been given pretty much on everything that's in our life is a bunch of bull crap, right? Normally I would just say the other word, but I don't know if someone is listening to this and has a weirdness with quote unquote swear words. So, but yeah, so it is pretty amazing what this vitamin does. And it's really incredible that we're told, oh, just take 1,000 units a day and that will be enough. But that's not the case. You want, I've said this before, but you want that storehouse within your body. Because what I tend to do is, I don't take it during the summer because I'm out every single day gardening. You know, I'm out watering my stuff. I'm talking to them, you know, or I go outside and I write and sometimes paint. So I end up getting outside and getting that solar energy, which is really great. So I don't take D3 during the summertime, but I know during the winter and during the late, autumn and during early spring, I'm probably going to be obviously less apt to going outside because I'm very much an indoor person and a homebody. And all of my most of my projects that I end up doing, you know, are inside projects, you know, like recording and everything. Although I do take my knitting outside and my writing outside and things like that. So I still do my projects, but under the sun. And then what's really great too is, like, especially if I'm knitting something, the beautiful masculine yang energy of the sun permeates whatever it is that I'm making. So it energizes it with that incredible energy. So this is a really great article. And like I said, this is more close to home for me. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but this is a really great article from Dr. Mercola. And I definitely recommend, I'm not, I don't really trust doctors, but there are a couple that come out who speak out against the industry of big pharma and the way that doctors just prescribe stuff and just don't seem to care. Dr. Mercola is definitely one of them. And Dr. Rauni Luukkonen-Kilde is another one. She used to be I believe the health minister for Finland, and then she just saw the hypocrisy, and obviously that just wasn't for her anymore. She spoke out a lot when the swine flu was going on, and telling people don't take the jab because that's been poisoned. And if you look into that, obviously there was a reporter, Jane Burgermeister, who was very privy to this information, and she found out that Baxter and Novartis had contaminated their own supplies of like Tamiflu and other shots, whatever shot that they were putting out, and it had been contaminated. So people were getting sicker off of the vaccination than they were the actual sickness. And again, it only killed like a couple hundred people, which is, yes, a lot. None of us should get killed from some stupid flu. But the regular flu kills 30 to 50,000 people per year. So that all aside, Dr. Mercola is really great. And I've signed up for his newsletter, so I get it every single day. And there is a wealth of information that he emails to people. And so I'll just read this article. It's an article from May 17th, 2011. New research shows that low levels of sunlight, coupled with glandular fever, could increase your risk of developing multiple sclerosis. This could be one reason that MS tends to be more common away from the equator. The study suggested that low levels of sunlight could affect how your body responds to infection. Vitamin D deficiency could be another possible link. BBC News reports, the researchers found that just by analyzing sunlight, they could explain 61% of the variation in the number of MS cases across England. However, when they combined the effect of sunlight and glandular fever, 72% of the variation in MS cases could be explained. Remember, when the American Cancer Society or dermatologists tell you that you should be avoiding the sun at all costs, they are dead wrong. And Dr. Mercola's comments are, I have been a renegade physician for over 2 decades now, and when you are as far ahead of the conventional mode of thinking as I try to be, it takes 5 to 20 years for the quote-unquote scientific studies to confirm what I've been advising people to do all along. I have seen this dozens of times now, and it is great when it occurs. Some of the more significant shifts that have occurred since I have been a renegade have been the widespread acceptance of vitamin D and omega-3 fats, and the gradual recognition that the low-fat diet approach is a disaster for most people, as they typically replace fat with unhealthy carbs. This is totally true. However, there are some major battles that need to be won, like vaccine freedom, GMO elimination, and fluoride and mercury removal still have a ways to go before we see a major shift. So let's examine the recent research which validates another long-held position I've had. What is MS? Multiple sclerosis is a chronic degenerative disease of the nerves in your brain and spinal column caused through a demyelization process. Myelin is the insulating waxy substance around the nerves in your central nervous system, and when the myelin is damaged by an autoimmune disease or self-destructive process in your body, the function of those nerves deteriorate over time, resulting in a number of symptoms, including muscle weakness, imbalance or loss of coordination, astigmatism and vision loss, tremors. MS may progress steadily, or acute attacks may be followed by a temporary remission of symptoms. A large number of studies have confirmed that your risk of MS increases the farther away you live from the equator. In fact, a lack of sunlight was identified as a risk factor for MS as early as 1922. Within the U.S., your risk of developing MS roughly doubles if you spend your childhood up to the age of 15 in northern states than if you live in the South. Another previously established risk factor is the Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, which causes glandular fever. 11 years ago, German researchers demonstrated the association between Epstein-Barr virus and multiple sclerosis, showing that in contrast to control populations, 100% of MS patients had antibodies